Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Nick Talks with another Wednesday Wisdom. And today I wanted to talk about vices. Like what is a vice? How do you classify it? And what to do about it based on my plentiful experience with vices. Referring to vices, I'm referring to addictive habits, things that are a compulsion or some behavior that you have less control over than maybe you should. Something that is taking more energy from the system than something that draws you less. For just as alcohol can be a vice, or nicotine, or drugs, or sex, or any of these things, weed, whatever you got, it can be a vice when it starts taking too much of your time and attention than what is appropriate. And I think based on my experiences, that is the key identifier. It's not so much about the substance. It's more about how you handle it. Like I've had, obviously, things like cocaine or MDMA are supposed to be clinically, chemically more addictive than, say, nicotine. Hard drugs usually list higher on that scale. But in my experience, I've had a way more difficult time kicking nicotine-based habits than some harder habits, right? And maybe that's just because of the chemical itself, where it's like, okay, I recognize this is like definitely a bad thing, whereas there's more nuance to things like drugs and alcohol. The process of identifying it is so subjective that only you can really tell. But that means that you have to be able to wean yourself off when it becomes too much. And that's the thing, is that there's many times where I've been engaging in activities that are maybe worrisome to the outside, but to me, it was never a big deal. I'm pretty good about gauging addiction to different things. And so I can tell when I'm getting in a rough spot. And so if I were to listen to those around me, then I would have had a way harder time and I would have changed my behavior so much. But since I listened to myself and I knew I was right, then it all turned out okay, and I was able to have some experiences that maybe I wouldn't have had if I had listened to everybody else who was all naysaying and whatnot. But it's easy to lie to yourself, and that's the difficult part about being your own accountability partner. It's easy to tell yourself a story and convince yourself that it's actually fine, when really it's probably time to quit. Now, there's always going to be that voice in the back that's saying, like, no, we're done. This is bad. But the dominant voice, it's much more pleasant to listen to someone saying you're fine, you're okay, like it doesn't matter, than it is to listen to someone saying that your behavior sucks and you're doing the wrong thing. But that voice is important to listen to. So, half the battle is identifying the vice or vices in the first place. And then the other half is doing something about it. Actually taking action to limit or abandon that behavior or that substance or that person or whatever. It is no easy task based on my experience, but one that has to be done, because the more you let a vice stick around, it's like a parasite that in the beginning, it doesn't take much from you, but slowly over time, after ignoring the voice inside that is telling you to quit, then it starts taking more and more energy, because now you're giving your power away to this substance, because you're allowing it to control your actions. When you want to be doing something else, you need to be doing something else, but you're choosing to do this thing because it owns you that much. It owns you more than you own yourself. And the further down that road that you go, the harder it is to pull yourself out of it. I believe that it's always possible. I believe that no matter how far you are into addiction, I have many comments about addiction that maybe we'll get into another time, but I think that there's always the opportunity to choose the way out, but it is, or at least can be, extremely difficult. Like the hardest thing to pull yourself out of that black hole and write yourself on the correct course and then stay on that correct course. That's also super difficult. It's just like you see weight loss, for example. Food was the vice. And it led them down this dark road, the fatties. It led them down this dark road of just gaining weight and gaining weight and gaining weight and becoming more and more unhealthy to the point where like it's ruining their life. And then you see people make that difficult choice and finally lose the weight. But that's not the end of the war. That is but one battle. And just because you win that doesn't mean you're good. You know what I mean? That's why you see so many people who lose a lot of weight end up gaining it back, relatively quickly within a couple years to a couple months. Because like the two sides of the coin, identifying that you have a vice and then doing something about it. But the doing something about it is a little bit of a two-parter where you have to start the war. You have to create the battle within yourself to get rid of this behavior. But then you have to stay at war until it's gone. And depending on how deep into that addiction you got, it may never be over. It may be the rest of your life you're fighting urges. But that is what it is. That's the price we pay for our indulgences. I'm fortunate enough where most of the things that I've gone down dark roads with, I'm pretty completely detached, or it's not a big deal. I'd say that there's some lingerers that like to whisper in my ear from time to time, but I got a pretty good handle on most things. But that's not the case for everyone. I was fortunate enough to have good people around me and have a good guiding inner voice, and I was able to pull myself out of things before it got too crazy. But some people don't have that. They don't have the support. They don't have the experience to understand even what's going on before it happens. And so, you just tumble and roll right down into that darkness. And then, the deeper you go, the harder it is to, like I said, to pull yourself out of it. But, anywho, there's a rule that I like to employ to protect myself against overindulgence or falling down into that darkness, like I said. And that is the rule of 3. Now, basically, I give every vice 1 point. Every vice is worth 1 point. And once you reach 3, you have to remove one. Always staying below 3 vices. Obviously, 0 is the best. If you could just be vice-free, then yeah, that's going to be better than 1 or 2 or whatever. But I'd say that I've noticed that I can live normally with 2 vices. And I don't mean that in the sense of 2 major addictions. I mean 2 things that maybe are not the best for me, but I do anyways. And maybe I can have a better handle on, but I have them handled pretty well. I find that I can monitor 2 potentially dangerous activities, behaviors, addictions, whatever. I can monitor 2 successfully, but once I get to 3, it starts to be too much to pay attention to all the things and keep them in check. Let's bring this into reality a little bit. So say I'm a drinker, I'm a smoker, and a gambler. That's 3 vices. So I would say 1 has to go. 1 has to go. Just pick one and it has to be gone. And then, okay, well, going through just simple logic. Gambling, expensive, potentially really expensive, and really draws you in. Not a gambling man myself. I always lose, so I just don't play. But alcohol, damages your health. It's pretty expensive, not great. Cigarettes, getting pretty expensive, damage your health. Let's get rid of gambling, just because they have the potential to lose way more money. And it reinforces the other behaviors, because once I go into the casino, I can smoke and I can drink and all that shit. So we get rid of that one. Well, now I can manage alcohol and smoking to a reasonable degree, to where it's not ruling my life. It's not completely controlling me. And it gives me more focus on those 2 things and less despair, because in the back of my mind, I know that okay, I've got these 2 things that are not great, but I got a handle on them. And then maybe you can even start focusing on shaving more and more vices off or reducing your interaction with those behaviors. And so that is my rule of 3. Now, part of the rule of 3 is, although inherently every vice is a 1, I would say if you have a particularly difficult time with a vice, bumping that up to a 2 is incredibly useful. Because then, say I'm drinking maybe a little bit too much, but then I really want to stop smoking, but it's just so fucking hard for me. And I'm really trying to stick to this rule of 3. If I put smoking at a 2, now it's a 2-pointer. Once I start smoking, it bumps me from 1 to 3, and now I'm over. And it's like, okay, fuck, like I'm losing control here. I'm losing control. I need to bring this back. And so it's either get rid of alcohol or get rid of smoking. And obviously, smoking's a fucking 2-pointer, so you're gonna want to get rid of that. So it just kind of helps me rationalize addictive behaviors and see them as like basically negative points on my total character. And so then I can start working to really limit that, and just basically drawing a line in my conscious mind of where we don't go past. So although obviously it's not good to have any vices, you can engage in behaviors that could be considered a vice without them becoming vices. But as long as we stay below this line, our life is manageable, and we can focus, and we can stay out of the red to a reasonable degree. And it's worked out great. It's worked out great for me. Like just drawing this point in the sand in my mind of like, we don't go past here. And then as soon as I recognize that I am, it's like, okay, I can't do this. I know where this leads, right? So it's helped me immensely. I'm no stranger to addiction. I've shared that many times. I think that there's some parts of my genetic heritage and childhood experiences and certain role models that really gave me the wonderful gift of some sort of addictive personality where I just, hey, go big or go home, man. And everything that I get into, that's how it goes. So, I got to be especially careful. And so coming up with rules and ways of being that help manage these things, I think is really important. If you know thyself, if you know that you have a hard time with these things, setting up some sort of structure that helps you stick to your goals is incredibly useful. So that's about all I have on that. Hopefully that's works for you. I mean, let me know what you think in the comments if you have experience with this. Let me know if you have any other methods of keeping yourself out of trouble, because that's the main game, dude. Like very often when I'm doing good, the doing good part doesn't stop. It doesn't dry up. It's the starting to do bad that comes in and ruins it, where like I think everything's great, and so I stop focusing on what I'm working on, and I fall down into these traps again. So, obviously we want to try and work for 0 vices, but that's easier said than done. And I would also make an argument that sometimes interacting with something like that is the point of living a little bit. If I have, maybe I don't want to drink, but I keep drinking, not to an excess, but like it doesn't make sense for me to drink alcohol, but then I still drink it. These experiences are part of life. And I don't think that fear of behavior is, whatever, tangential. But anywho, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And with that, we'll say, Nick out.